Capillaries are the next blood vessels after the arterioles. So the arterioles lead directly into the capillaries. The diameter is only slightly larger than an erythrocyte, which is pretty amazing. So erythrocytes actually will go through the capillary in a single file manner because the diameter is so small. For most of them, the wall consists of solely a tunica intima, which again is that single layer of endothelial cells. The function that happens in the capillary is that they are referred to as the functional units of the cardiovascular system, because this is where there is exchange between the blood and the tissues, whether it's the systemic capillaries or whether it's the pulmonary capillaries. There's going to be some exchange between the blood and tissues. So gas, nutrients, and waste exchange occur between the capillaries and the tissues of the body. We have various types of capillaries. There's three main ones that you need to know. As far as the two types of capillaries, if we think of the systemic capillaries, this is where gases and nutrients pass from the blood into the tissues. Whereas in the pulmonary capillaries, the gases are going to be going in the opposite direction. So with the tissues would be the alveoli, which would be the lungs. In this case, gases and are going to go back into the blood, because this, remember, is specifically including deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart. It goes to the pulmonary capillaries, where it is going to pick up the fresh oxygen and take it back to the left side of the heart. So the three types of capillaries are continuous, fenestrated, and sinusoids. The continuous are defined as having a complete lining that's aided by tight junctions. So the most common example is in the muscle and the brain. The next group has fenestrations, which are pores that allow for fluid exchange between the blood and the interstitial fluid. The examples would be in the small intestine as well as the kidney. And then finally, the sinusoids are going to have large gaps between endothelial cells, which are absent, and endothelial cells and an absent basement membrane. It allows for large molecules and cells to go to and from the blood. So the places that we find these are in bone marrow and the liver. So the continuous ones are the impermeable ones, essentially. Then as we go to fenestrated and sinusoids, they basically start to become more porous. So there's some fenestrations or pores in the small intestine and kidney, and there's large openings in the bone marrow as well as the liver for sinusoids. So our next slide shows these types of capillaries. So for the continuous capillary, we can see basically tight junctions between the cells. You'll see here that there is basically no openings between the two cells. For the fenestrated capillaries, we have these pores, which are fenestrations. So you can just remember them as pores. So some small openings that would be present here. And then finally, the largest openings would be in sinusoids, which you can see here. So these would be the ones that you would find in the bone marrow and the liver. And then the fenestrated would be in the intestines as well as the kidney. The next group of blood vessels is the veins. And veins are going to drain capillaries and return blood to the heart. So one of their jobs is for venous returning that blood back towards the heart. The blood pressure in the veins is going to be much lower than arteries. So it begins high in the aorta, and then it's going to start to slowly decrease and decrease until we get to the veins. One thing that we refer to the veins is that it has a blood reservoir. And what that means is that at any one time, 60% of the body's blood is going to be held in the veins. As you saw from the previous diagram, there are three groups of veins. The first one is the venules. They're the smallest of the veins. And then the diameter of the vein starts to get larger and larger. We have some medium-sized veins. And then finally, the largest veins, like the vena cava. Present in most of the veins are valves. And this is important because it ensures that the blood goes in only one direction. So it's for venous blood flow to go only in that one direction. This slide is showing some of the general arteries. So we're going to begin by looking at the arteries that come out of the heart region. So they've kind of blown up the heart for us to see here. And you can first see coming out of the left ventricle is the aortic arch, leading to the ascending aorta. Then the aorta there's going to be some branches that come off of it. The first one is called the brachiocephalic trunk. The next one is the left common carotid artery and the left subclavian artery. Those are going to branch further then. For example, the brachiocephalic trunk is this region from here to here, and it branches to become the right subclavian artery and right common carotid artery. The aorta then is going to descend behind the heart, and when it does so, it's called the descending thoracic aorta. When it is below the diaphragm, it continues to descend, where it then branches in the abdominal area to become the common iliac arteries. Looking at the rest of the diagram here, we can see where we have the subclavian arteries in the shoulder area. That subclavian artery leads to the armpit, which is the axillary artery. The upper arm, which is the brachial artery. At the elbow, that brachial artery branches to the radial and ulnar arteries. For the aorta continuing in the abdominal area, as it descends, there's a branch called the celiac trunk. Then the mesenteric arteries, which are going to lead to the GI tract. A blood vessel going to the kidney called the renal artery, to the gonads, like the testes and ovaries, called the gonadal artery. And then in the leg, the iliac artery is going to lead to the femoral artery, popliteal artery in the knee, posterior tibial artery, and anterior tibial artery. So those are responsible for taking blood away from the heart. The veins are responsible for returning deoxygenated blood back towards the right atrium. So we're going to begin at the feet because we're going in the opposite direction. So we have the anterior tibial veins, posterior tibial veins, popliteal vein, great saphenous vein, femoral vein. Those lead to the iliac veins, like external iliac vein, common iliac vein. That leads to the inferior vena cava. Leading into the inferior vena cava would be things like the gonadal vein, renal vein, hepatic vein from the liver. For the upper arm, we see the radial and ulnar veins, leading to the brachial veins. We have veins like the median cubital vein, cephalic vein, basilic vein, all leading to the axillary vein, brachiocephalic vein, subclavian vein. Coming from the head, we have the jugular veins. From the neck would be the subclavian vein, brachiocephalic vein, eventually leading into the superior vena cava. So the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava both lead into the right atrium. For this inset in the diagram, it shows the right brachiocephalic vein and left subclavian, right brachiocephalic vein, left brachiocephalic vein, leading into the superior vena cava, which goes to the right atrium. In the lower part of the body here, we have everything from the legs leading to the left and right common iliac veins, which lead to the inferior vena cava, and then back into the right atrium.